The courtroom was cold, clinical, and thick with tension as Marcus Cole stepped through its heavy wooden doors. Clad in his full Navy dress uniform, his ribbons and seal insignia spoke for him before he even uttered a word. Heads turned. People whispered. There was a presence about him, not just in the disciplined way he walked, but in the calm fire in his eyes. Marcus had faced insurgents in foreign deserts and pulled wounded brothers out of burning vehicles in the dead of night. But none of that prepared him for the subtle war of dignity he was now fighting at home. He wasn't here as a soldier, he was here as a witness in a civil rights case against a man who had worn a badge without honor, Officer Bradley Knox. Knox, a stocky white cop with a long history of excessive force complaints and an even longer history of avoiding consequences, sat smugly at the defense table. This time, though, the stakes were different. Marcus had seen him rough up a black teenager during a routine stop, slamming the boy against the hood of a car, shouting slurs, and threatening him with his weapon while his partner stood silent. That image had burned itself into Marcus's mind. As a SEAL, he'd defended freedom abroad. As a black man, he now had to defend it in his own country. When Marcus took the stand, he met Knox's eyes, calmly, directly. Knox responded with a sneer, leaning over to whisper something into his attorney's ear. Marcus heard it. Everyone near the bench heard it. "I don't take orders from a monkey in uniform." A hush fell across the room. Even the court reporter's fingers paused on the keys. The judge, an older white man with a weathered face and sharp eyes, peered over his glasses and raised a brow, but said nothing, yet. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply straightened his back and waited. The prosecutor began with simple questions about Marcus's background, his service, his rank. Marcus responded with quiet strength. 22 years in the Navy. Multiple deployments. Silver Star, Bronze Star, SEAL Team 6. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, just telling the truth. Then came the heart of the matter, what he saw that night. Marcus described the events with precision, no embellishment. Knox's lawyer, clearly rattled by Marcus's calm demeanor, tried to bait him, asking if Marcus had a grudge against cops, if he was angry at America, if maybe he had misinterpreted the situation. Marcus didn't blink. "No, sir," he said, steady. "I know what I saw. I know what justice looks like. And I know when it's being choked to death in the street." A murmur spread across the gallery. Knox fidgeted in his chair, jaw clenched. The tension in the room was palpable, a slow boil. Marcus could feel the shift. This wasn't just a case. This was a reckoning. Recess was called, and the courtroom slowly emptied into the marbled hallways outside, buzzing with tension. Marcus Cole remained seated for a moment longer, eyes fixed forward, breathing steady. His testimony had struck a nerve, and he knew it. Officer Bradley Knox, on the other hand, was seething. His smug facade had started to crack, and the pressure of being exposed, by a black man in uniform, no less, had peeled back a layer of restrained hatred he could no longer hide. Marcus finally rose, walking with quiet composure toward the hallway, but as he passed the defense table, he caught the unmistakable sound of Knox muttering under his breath, "You people never learn your place." The words rolled off like acid, but Marcus had been trained not to react to fire, he controlled it. He paused, turned his head slightly, and looked Knox dead in the eye, not with anger, but with the silent confidence of a man who had faced death and walked away. That look, that calm defiance, lit something in Knox. As Marcus continued toward the hall, Knox suddenly stood, barking at his attorney, then shoved the chair back with a screech. The bailiff noticed but didn't move fast enough. In a flash of uncontrolled rage, Knox stormed toward Marcus. "You think that uniform makes you better than me?" he shouted. Before anyone could react, Knox raised his foot and drove it into Marcus's side with a vicious kick, sending the SEAL staggering slightly. The gasp that followed shook the entire courtroom. Papers dropped. Voices shouted. The judge, just returning from chambers, froze in disbelief as the bailiff tackled Knox to the ground. "Order!" the judge thundered, pounding his gavel as chaos erupted. Attorneys scrambled, reporters grabbed their phones, and Marcus, still on his feet, stood unmoved, his face composed, his hand resting calmly at his side. The judge stared at Knox, now restrained and cursing beneath the weight of two bailiffs. "Are you out of your mind, officer?" he shouted, incredulous. Knox spat. "He's a liar. A traitor in uniform. He's not one of us." That was the moment the air shifted. It wasn't just rage anymore, it was exposure. Knox hadn't just attacked a witness. He had assaulted a decorated veteran in front of a sitting judge, a gallery of press, and a jury. But what stood out the most, what truly silenced the room, was Marcus's response. He didn't strike back, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood tall and said, in a low voice that carried across the courtroom, "This is exactly what I came here to show you." And with that, the reality of what had just happened settled on everyone present like a weight too heavy to ignore. The judge sat back slowly, his eyes narrowing, no longer just presiding, now watching everything with the clarity of someone who had just seen truth in its rawest form. The next morning, the courtroom was filled to capacity, press, attorneys, activists, and silent onlookers packed into every bench, every corner. The image of Officer Bradley Knox kicking Marcus Cole, a decorated black Navy SEAL, had already made headlines overnight. Public outrage rippled through social media, but inside the courtroom, the mood was even more electric. Judge Whitaker entered with a grim expression, clearly aware that this was no longer a simple testimony hearing, it had become a crucible for something much larger. Knox sat with a bruise on his ego and a stiffness in his posture, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. Marcus Cole took the stand again, his uniform crisp, demeanor unchanged. There was no triumph in his eyes, only purpose. When asked if he wished to proceed with further testimony despite the assault, Marcus simply nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe the truth still matters." Then, reaching into his coat pocket, Marcus pulled out a small flash drive. With the court's permission, he said, looking at the judge, "I'd like to submit video evidence recorded the night of the incident." The courtroom stilled as the judge approved the motion. A screen was rolled in, and the lights dimmed slightly. The footage began, taken from Marcus's vehicle dashcam and his personal body cam, which he'd turned on the moment he sensed something off that night. The grainy footage showed the teenage boy being pulled over by Knox. The officer's tone was already aggressive, his language coarse, dismissive. The boy looked terrified. Then came the shove, the slurs, the moment Knox slammed him against the hood and screamed, "You people need to be reminded who's in charge." Gasps echoed as the courtroom heard Knox's voice again, this time captured in full clarity. But the real blow came at the end of the footage, where Knox, unaware he was being recorded, bragged to his partner, "No camera, no case. They're just bodies to move. No one listens to their kind anyway." That single sentence was a thunderclap. The court clerk covered her mouth. One of the jurors looked physically ill. The judge sat in stunned silence, knuckles pale against the wood of his bench. Knox's attorney scrambled to object, but it was too. 3 days had passed since the harrowing courtroom drama that had exposed the brutal assault and deep-rooted injustice inflicted by Officer Knox. The tension in the city had not eased, and many awaited the outcome with bated breath. When the day finally arrived for the courtroom to reconvene, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Marcus stood quietly, his posture resolute but calm. The charges against Knox, assault, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations, were serious, and everyone understood the gravity of the moment. The judge entered the room with a commanding presence, his face etched with the responsibility he bore. Turning to Marcus, he spoke with a tone that was both respectful and solemn. "You've served this country with honor. And now, you've served justice at home." Those words echoed through the courtroom, reminding everyone that Marcus's battle was not just personal but emblematic of a larger fight for fairness and dignity. The proceedings moved swiftly, but every word and gesture carried weight. Knox sat handcuffed, his expression a mixture of defiance and defeat. As the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, a hush fell over the room. Then came the gavel's sharp sound, a definitive, unwavering declaration of guilt on all counts. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted. Knox was led away, the clank of his cuffs a stark reminder that no one was above the law. Marcus remained standing, his eyes scanning the faces of those around him. The mother of the assaulted teenager approached him with trembling hands, her eyes brimming with tears of relief and gratitude. She embraced Marcus tightly, whispering words of thanks that spoke volumes more than any formal statement ever could. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters and cameras gathered, eager for a comment that could encapsulate the significance of the day. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and clear despite the emotional weight of the moment. "Justice doesn't wear a badge," he said, "it wears courage." His statement resonated deeply, capturing the essence of the fight they had all witnessed, a fight not just against a corrupt officer but against the silence and complacency that allowed such abuse to persist. The crowd absorbed his words, and for a brief moment, hope flickered in the hearts of many who longed for a fairer system. The victory was not merely legal, it was symbolic. It underscored that accountability was possible, that courage could overcome fear, and that true justice transcended uniforms and titles. Marcus's journey had been arduous and painful, but this day marked a turning point, not only for him and the victims but for the community that had stood behind him. As the sun set on the courthouse steps, Marcus felt a quiet strength settle within him. The road ahead remained long, but the verdict was a beacon of promise, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. And in that promise lay the hope that someday, justice would no longer be the exception but the rule.